So first of all, I would really like to thank Bob for organizing this workshop. I think that I've attended many conferences, and I was really happy to show my work to colleagues. But I think that this is the first time I really speak about something that truly matters in our community. So this is something where that's mostly coming up from discussion with a colleague of mine, which is called Mathieu. He's the guy who proposed the word wrangling, which I don't really understand. I think you understand it more than me. So, so the idea is to try to think what we can do to deal with those kind of issues. Who is into audio processing in this? So most of my examples will be in audio processing because this is what I do on a daily basis. I will try to be as self-explanatory as possible for the other people. So I will talk about a little bit of horses that I dealt with in my past experience, and two tools that I'm now using on a daily basis to minimize the impact of those kind of issues. Those are software that I've developed in my lab. I will talk about a little bit, and I will talk about a really important matter, which is more, let's say, a social matter, that, in my opinion, have a really strong potential for at least dealing more explicitly or less naively with horses, is the issue of reproducible research in numerical data analysis. So we start with, so I stick in my presentation to a typology, and then I saw that Bob was using taxidermy, so I say, okay, go ahead. So horse taxidermy, for me, there are public horses, and let's say hidden horses or buried horses. So I will take one example of each, and also Potemkin village, which are really, really common in our. So I will take an example. Maybe Emmanuel, you don't know that you are using public horses on a daily basis, but this is what I think. So for people who are not really familiar with audio processing, I will try to explain a little bit. People really, really like to do source separation. That's a dream goal. You have something that is mixed. Okay, you have audio with the signal plus the noise, and then you want to remove the noise and have a really clear signal. That's something we really like in signal processing. Most of the time what we do a short-term Fourier transform, so we go into a frequency domain. This frequency domain appears to be complex. It's complex, but you can split it in two parts, the real one and the, let's say, the magnitude and the phase. So we go and we forget about the phase, but we go back into the inverse Fourier transform, and then we have some system here, this kind of black box, that have some assumptions about the signal we are seeking to separate. And then, with this system, we are able to create a cleaner system. In my opinion, it's a horse. Why? Well, in fact, the NMF, it stands for non-negative matrix factorization. It's an iterative scheme, and for that we need to set a little number of parameters, like the number of iterations, and we need to do that for balancing computational cost and performance. And in fact, what we see, which is really something that is, let's say, really, really common in data processing and machine learning systems, is that you have iterations here. So and you have some kind of cost, okay? Most of the time, this will be quadratic cost, cube black Leibler, Itakura Saito. And then you have this system that is really, really able to start from something and improve things, okay? So you have this curve. We start from a really, really bad guess, and then we go, and you can prove that you will go down smoothly, okay? And then the problem is that this is not something that we are optimizing. When we want to do source separation, what most of the time we want to have is that we need to have good signal quality, okay? And in fact, most of the time, if you run through the iterations, what we call SDR, so that's signal to degradation ratio, so that's our measure, we have something that increases at the beginning, so you have the cost. When you are optimizing this cost, you are also optimizing the final criterion. So when the system starts to iterate, it improves the quality of the output. But when it goes deeper into this kind of iteration, then the signals degrade. And for me, in fact, this is some kind of a public horse, because in fact, what you are optimizing, it's a quality of fit optimized criterion, but your target criteria, so that the most common ones in source separation are signal to degradation ratio, artifact and interference. And what most people do is that they use the technique which is called early stop. Okay, so that's really, really common into any kind of matrix factorization techniques and machine learning techniques, which are most of the time iterative by nature. You stop the iteration by to ensure the non-divergence of the target criteria. And this is something which is completely, like people say, okay, we stop at 100, 200. And those things are really something that if you are trying to reproduce the system and try to understand things, that is something that you really, really need to struggle with for several years to kind of understand and get the feeling about what's happening. So digital data analysis is still is infancy. It's less than half a century. There are a lot of uncontrolled behaviors, and they are part of research, and everyone is more or less happy with it. Okay, we need to publish or we perish, and sometimes, well, you just get along with it. And this is something that is really social. If people deal with that, I will have to deal with that. If people don't, then I have to stick to my career and not try to think too much. And that said, there are, those kind of spurious correlation are well-known matters in many research fields. And the fact that the engineering community puts so few effort on addressing those kind of matter is, in my opinion, really childish. So there are many ways our community is severely harming itself with badly designed tasks, too small and biased data sets, and unrealistic and non-reproducible results. So I will take another example. This is more Potemkin village, so I will try to define what a Potemkin village. Do you know what is a Potemkin village? No? Okay. Thank you, Dan. It's back in the days of communism in Russia. Those villages were built to show the potential of communism to Western people. So those villages were really like the perfect thing, okay? But completely made as a show. And, okay, and here I will. This is a sorry. This is something that can happen a lot in science. I really love these methods. I really love this problem, and I really want to speak about this problem or this solution. And I will try to find something that shows that it works. Most of the time, people are not really aware that they are doing this kind of thing. But actually, people do. And as, let's say, a social community, research communities have to deal with that. So I have an example of this kind of Potemkin village in acoustic scene similarity retrieval. So again, I will try to be as simple as possible. The idea is that you have raw audio. That can be music, that can be also, in this case, it was something where people were putting microphones in urban areas and trying to say, okay, those two recordings are coming from a park or a busy road, busy street, or those kind of things. So you compute some kind of features, you then go into abstract mathematical models, and then you compare those mathematical models through Monte Carlo methods, and then you know, you have at least an estimation of how close those two signals are. Okay, so that's really classic. That has been used in music a lot also. And Jean-Julien Aucouturier, which is also a CNRS researcher working at IRCAM, published an influential paper in 2007 stating that the bag of frame approach, which is basically MFCC plus GMMs, a sufficient model for urban soundscape. So they had really near perfect results, look, 97%. So basically it kind of closed the case. The case in terms of, let's say, electrical engineering and computer science side, it was something where you could say, okay, we have a well-defined task, we have found a solution, and we have 97%, so that's fine. A lot of people got the attention on that. People were not E or CS, but more people like urban planners or people who are working on noise regulations. Me, I got interested in this as most academics do. You have a master student, and then you try to replicate. For a month, he tried, and he got like really, really weird results on different databases, like slightly above chance. So I was like, what was my guess? When you have a master student that finds results which are close to random. So I was like, you should work better, maybe it's a bug and everything. And he was like, no, I tried everything, I reproduced. Blah, blah, blah. So I said, well, the only thing that I can do is try to reproduce myself, and I replicate the results of the masters. So that was a problem. In fact, there was a flaw clearly in the study. The database was really, really badly designed. So basically, he recorded at the same place and then matched a chunk of audio which were, I don't know, 2 or 3 seconds apart. So I will not go into detail because it's a bit too detailed. But we have a new figures now. GMMs are close to useless on well-built data sets. For me, the best data set to date has been recorded at Queen Mary. So congratulations. And this where those people are really taken care at recording things at different locations, different weather conditions, different recordists. Those things really matter. And then when you try to tackle those databases, those systems are completely useless. This means that if, for example, most of people talked about the power of GMMs, and it leads to a lot of kind of problem with Monte Carlo sampling when you're computing the similarity. If you remove this step by averaging the MFCCs, you get the same results. So that was something that we published here. And then the problem goes, it's a social problem. Jean-Julien is a friend of mine. I really think that he's a great researcher. So how do I deal with that? So basically, I talked to him, and he said, okay, we did something bad. So the good thing is that it's Al here, but there's also Jean-Julien in the offers, which is kind of the way I think that was the most fair, because then if you get reviewed, you will most probably get reviewed by the guy who's saying that his research is a flaw. Okay, so those things really matter as a community, but how do we deal with that? Is the, let's say, blind review process fair in some way? Those are questions. Those are past experience I had, and for me, I've tried to tackle those kind of problem by spending time reproducing results, but also trying to develop systems, tools that we can use to at least better control those kind of problems. We are in a data processing field, so the bigger problem is data. Okay, we need lots of data. We need well-annotated data, which is really costly, and we need public domain data with controllable complexity. So how do we do with that when you have not a lot of money and not a lot of human power? In my opinion, simulated data is okay, because it's cheap, and as long as the aim is to gain knowledge and not to go to something where you say, okay, this system is on my simulated data, got 99%, we can sell the thing to a company, and they will build a product that will work. This is not something that will work like this, but at least when you have simulated data, those data are controlled, which I mean that you can, in this case, gain knowledge. Simulation data is not real data, but it's also not synthesized data. There are many fields where basically you put a model, and then you generate data according to this model, and you are able to estimate the parameter of this model, which is really good. Otherwise, there is a strong bug in your code, but this is something like a first step. But I think we can go into a little bit higher with simulated data. The tricky part is to choose the right level of abstraction, because it depends on the kind of algorithm you want to evaluate. If you are too close, let's say your simulating model is too close to the one that the system are actually using, you might get into trouble. So we built something which is called SimScene. Okay, so you have those scenes, and it means that you can tune it. So it's really built as an audio sequencer with an abstract scheduling of parameters. So you have, let's say, an average inter-onset time, an average amplitude, and some, let's say, standard deviations of those parameters. And those events are defined as set of recording samples. So this means that in this system, you cannot control which sample will be used at which time. And the outcomes follows the, let's say, the audio scene model proposed by Nelken and Alain de Chevenier. And here for statistics, it's a kind of a skeleton of events on a bed of texture. We used it with Emmanuel to synthesize data for the coming two decades challenge, which are dealing with audio and event analysis. So it's in MATLAB, it's open source. As I said, it's used in two different decades challenges. And the produced data sets can be put on archive, because as soon as you have the right for all the recordings of the events and the texture, the thing that we build can go into the public domain. I will put quickly some figures that shows the potential of the approach in terms of outcomes, in terms of knowledge. One cool thing that we can do is that we can vary the event to background ratio. So, okay, you have the texture, which are the backgrounds, and then the events. And the more you put background noise, the more difficult is the task to recognize the events. Okay, so here we will go from 6 to minus 12 dB. Here we have different, too bad it's not in color, but we have different systems, operating systems that have been submitted to the first edition of the Decades Challenge. Here in solid line we have the baseline, okay, that has been written by Emmanuel and Dan and Dimitrios. So this was the reference provided as an example, and those systems, you can clearly see here 6 dB was the level that was present into the development set, okay, and you can see that they really all go down close to the base, really close to the baseline, except one here, which is coming from, which was the winner of this challenge. This was a system coming from Fraunhofer, and which had in this system, let's say, a pre-processing that was really dealing with background noise. So here we can see that by varying some parameters that we can only do by synthesizing, simulating data, or annotating a lot of data, we can see that most of the system failed when we go up into more background, whereas only one remains. You can do also something which is more tricky. We will consider, so here is the results achieved in the challenge. Here we replicated those scenes with different recordings coming from Queen Mary. And you can see that most of the system, except two, which were, they had a numerical issue, kind of remained at the same performance. And here, what we did is that basically we recorded the same events and the same background noise, type of background noise, but not at Queen Mary, but at Yersin in Nantes. And basically you can see that all the system clearly fails and go up to the baseline, except one, which is again the Fraunhofer system. So what was different? Well, in this case, I think it was more an issue about overfitting in this case, because as we switch listening condition, things goes really down, except for one. And this is something where we can show the potential of this kind of simulated systems. I'm not stating that the system for the Fraunhofer system should go in production, but if I would have to choose one, I would definitely choose this one. 5 minutes? Okay. Another problem when we do data processing is that it's processing. Do you know about the scientific method? Do you do science? In fact, sometimes it's good to go back to the roots. Okay. So when we strictly follow the scientific method, basically we start by analysis. So we describe a problem. We have an hypothesis, a really bright idea. So we specify this bright idea, and then we have a synthesis part where we implement the solution, and then a validation part where we compute the performance. I will not go into detail, but there are something like a peer review at the end. And basically explains, so that's a big tool I've written. It's supposed to help you with, for the last two parts, basically. So what we do, we collect test data, we design the experiment, we code, we put everything within something. We deploy this experiment, we run lots of tests, we vary a huge amount of varying parameters. If you have 200 computers, then you can go crazy. If you have only one, then you have to restrict yourself. And then you collect data, you generate tables and graphs. Most of the time you loop, and then the guy which is supervising you will stop the loop, which can go infinite, and then say there you have to publish. Okay, and this is a tricky part here, where basically a lot of code can be written, a lot of pain can be experienced, and this is where explains might help you. So it strictly follows the design of experiment paradigm. As a processing code, it's a feed-forward pipeline. It's been designed to be multi-user, multi-core, and multi-host. And it's also able to reduce data, because sometimes you have, let's say, a large number of parameters you want to evaluate, and a large number of metrics, then everything explodes exponentially. So reducing to something that you can analyze and discuss with people can be really tricky. And there are bindings for visualizing in MATLAB, LaTeX, and HTML. So we have set up a really nice website. I've put up some demonstration for clustering, source separation, etc. I'm starting to go into production, so I worked on this for 4 years. My PhD students use it, but I don't know if they are really they feel obliged to use it, or if they really like it. So if you want to give a shot, I would be really happy to have some feedback. So to conclude, the horse phenomenon is a reality. Potemkin villages are really very common, all the more in emerging fields. So you have a good idea, you put up some, let's say, self-explanatory data, and you say the problem is solved. Scientists as individuals are smart humans, yet the social impact is very strong. As a community, I really strongly believe that the scientific method should be enforced, but this is boring. So strict reproducible research is the way to go, and we really need tools for that, not only languages or GitHub or something. So to speak about why those things matter, I think this book is interesting. It has been written by Cathy O'Neill. Also, if you're interested into reproducibility, Lorena Barba made some kind of manifesto that is really easy to read and easy to enforce if you're in the academic field. Also, a news in Nature So Victoria Stodden is one now of the 3 reproducibility editors appointed to look over code and datasets submitted by authors to the Journal of the American Statistical Association. And now if you want to submit, I will never for my career I think, but if you want to submit to JSA, now you really need to share data and code unless you have really a good excuse. So those things really matter. And how we can deal with that, I think it has also a social problem. And if there are a question about how can we do better, if you look at those 3 slides and you seek for the, let's say, the factor which is specific here, can you identify it? Gender. Maybe this is something that we really desperately need in electrical engineering and computer science. I think we need more women, and I think those matter. Maybe it's, let's say, I'm not drawing any kind of conclusion on 3 samples, but maybe it's something that would help. Thank you.